Hey everyone, so if you have already read The Wrath of Grendel or followed along with me as I read it, now this is the next part. So this is called The Coming of Beowulf. So this is when our hero finally makes it over, hopefully, to take on this monster that has been making a living nightmare in Herod's kingdom, or in Hrothgar's kingdom and in the mead hall called Herod. So it starts out, read along with me. So the living sorrow of Helfadine's son simmered bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. In his far-off home, Beowulf, Hygelac's follower and the strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in the world, heard how Grendel filled nights with horror, and quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaimed that he'd go to that famous king, would sail across the quay to Hrothgar now when help was needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Geats. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea would point the prow straight to that distant Danish shore. Okay, so Beowulf is, of course, our hero. He's described somewhat here. We'll get more of a description later, but he's described as the strongest of all of the men in his country, greater and stronger than anyone, not only in his country, but really in the whole world. So he's described as being one of, the bravest and strongest, and he's decided that he's going to go fight this creature. And it says nobody in his country, not even the wise ones, really told him he shouldn't go, that the omens were good, that he was going to win this battle, and they urged him to adventure on and take the adventure. So he chose all of the biggest and bravest men that he could find. He took 14 of the biggest men from his country, and they sailed across to go help Hrothgar and his men. So line 125 here, it says, Then they sailed, set their ship out on waves, under the cliffs, ready for what came. They wound through the currents, the seas beating at the sand, and were borne in the lap of their shining ship, lined with gleaming armor, going safely into the oak-hard boat where their hearts... In that oak-hard boat where their hearts took them. The wind hurried them over the waves. The ship foamed through the sea like a bird, until, in the time they had known it would take, standing in the round-curled prow, they could see sparkling hills, high and green, jutting up over the shore. Rejoicing in those rock-steep cliffs, they quietly ended their voyage. Jumping to the ground, the Geats pushed their boat to the sand and tied it in place, mail shirts and armor rattling as they swiftly moored their ship, and then they gave thanks to God for their easy crossing. All right, so they finally get across. They have on their mail shirts, which we've talked about that some. It's like those little pieces of chainmail attached together. So this heavy armor they have on, and they finally see the green, they see the sparkling hills, so they're so excited to get out of their boats. They jump to the ground. So it says here, high on a wall, a Danish watcher, patrolling along the cliff, saw the travelers crossing to the shore, their shields raised and shining. He came riding down, Hrothgar's lieutenant, spurring his horse, needing to know why they'd landed, these men in armor. Shaking his heavy spear in their faces, he spoke. Whose soldiers are you, who have been carried in your deep-keeled ship across the sea road to this country of mine? Listen, I've stood on these cliffs longer than you know, keeping our coast free of pirates, raiders, sneaking ashore from their ships, seeking our lives and our gold. None have ever come more openly, and yet you've offered no password, no sign from my prince, no permission from my people for your landing here. Nor have I ever seen, out of all the men on earth, one greater than has come with you. No commoner carries such weapons, unless his appearance and his beauty are both lies. You tell me your name and your father's. No spies go further onto Danish soil than you've come already. Strangers from wherever it was you sailed, tell it and tell it quickly. The quicker the better, I say, for us all. Speak. Say exactly who you are and from where and why. So basically this person who's in charge of watching, it's like a Danish guard, sees Beowulf and his men sail their ship over. They get off the ship. They have all this armor on. They have their swords. So they look like soldiers. And he rides down on his horse and he's like, who are you? Like, why did you come to my land and you offer no password? I didn't know that you're supposed to come. You're just showing up with all of your stuff for battle. So this guard thinks that they are there to fight, he thinks that they're there to fight him and his men. So he's trying to figure out what's going on. We also get another little description of Beowulf here. So he's like, I've never seen anyone greater than this guy here. He's the most handsome person I've ever seen. He has giant weapons. So from this, we can kind of gather that Beowulf is like well armed. He has a sword, and is attractive. He's huge. He's strong. So he's described as looking like no one this guard has ever seen before. So it says here before we move on to the next page, their leader answered him, Beowulf, unlocking words from deep in his breast. So this means he has like just a really deep voice. He says, we're Geats, men who follow Hygelac. My father was a famous soldier, known far and wide as a leader of men. His name was Edgethough. His life lasted many winters. Wise men all over the earth surely remember him still. And we have come seeking your prince, Helfidin's son, protector of this people, only in friendship. Instruct us, watchmen. Help us with your words. Our errand is a great one. Our business with the glorious king of the Danes no secret. There's nothing dark or hidden in our coming. You know, if we've heard the truth and been told honestly, that your country is cursed with some strange, vicious creature that hunts only at night and that no one has seen. It's said, watchmen, that he has slaughtered your people, brought terror to the darkness. Perhaps Hrothgar can hunt here in my heart for some way to drive this devil out. If anything will ever end the evils afflicting your wise and famous lord, here he can cool his burning sorrow, or else he may see his suffering go on forever, for as long as Heorot towers high on your hills. So Beowulf basically is like, hey, we know what's going on here. We heard about your monster, so I want to come help you, see if I can find a way to help you beat this monster. So he is talking about how they, for 12 years, have tried to fight Grendel, this monster off, and haven't been able to do it. So he's saying, I think that we can do it. So the officer, it says here, let me scroll down a little bit. The mounted officer answered him bluntly. The brave watchman, this is what the officer says. A soldier should know the difference between words and deeds and keep that knowledge clear in his brain. I believe your words. I trust in your friendship. Go forward, weapons and armor and all, on into Denmark. I'll guide you myself, and my men will guard your ship. Keep it safe here on our shores. Your fresh tarred boat, watch it well, until that curving prow carries across the sea to Geatland, a chosen warrior who bravely does battle with the creature hunting our people, who survives that horror unhurt and goes home bearing our love. So the guard's like, okay, if you think you can do this, I believe you. I'll show you how to get to the king, and my men here will guard your ship until you're ready to take it home. So the guard sounds like he believes in them and thinks that they're going to be able to defeat Grendel. So the story goes on. Then they moved. Their boat lay moored, tied tight to its anchor, glittering at the top of their golden helmets. Wild boar heads gleamed, shining decorations, swinging as they marched, erect like guards, like sentinels, as though ready to fight. They marched, Beowulf and his men, and their guide, until they could see the gables of Heorot, covered with hammered gold and glowing in the sun, the most famous of all dwellings, towering, majestic, its glittering roofs visible across the land. Their guide reined in his horse, pointing to that hall built by Hrothgar for the best, bravest of his men. The path was plain, and they could see their way. Okay, so they see this mead hall. It's decorated with gold, glittering roofs. So really, it seems like no expenses were spared on creating this mead hall. So this is part, I think I told you guys that in all, this poem is like 7,000 lines long, so we're going to skip some stuff. So Beowulf and his men arrive at Heorot and are about to be escorted in to see King Hrothgar. So this is when Beowulf meets the king. Line 229 here. Beowulf arose with his men around him, ordering a few to remain with their weapons, leading the others quickly along under Heorot's steep roof into Hrothgar's presence. Standing on that prince's own hearth, helmeted, the silvery metal of his mail shirt gleaming with a smith's high art, he greeted the Danes' great lord. So this is Beowulf saying hello to Hrothgar. So he says, Hail, Hrothgar, Hygelac is my cousin and my king. The days of my youth have been filled with glory. Now Grendel's name has echoed in our land. Sailors have brought us stories of Heorot, the best of all mead halls, deserted and useless when the moon hangs in the skies and the sun had lit light and life fleeing together. All right, so we're going to stop right here. So basically, the only way to make a name for yourself was to have family that has done something heroic, for people to continue talking about your family. So that's why every time Beowulf introduces himself, he introduces himself by who his father was. He says, Hygelac is my cousin. So he introduces himself like this, and then he goes on to say, we've heard about your monster, everybody's heard about your monster. So basically he's saying, I'm here to help you. So we're going to pick up here on line 244. So my people have said, the wisest, most knowing, and best of them, that my duty was to go to the Danes' great king. They have seen my strength for themselves, have watched me rise from the darkness of war, dripping with my enemy's blood. I drove 5 great giants into chains. I chased all of that race from the earth. I swam in the blackness of night, hunting monsters out of the ocean and killing them one by one. Death was my errand, and the fate they had earned. Now Grendel and I are called together, and I've come. Grant me then, Lord and protector of this noble place, a single request. I have come so far, O shelterer of warriors, and your people's loved friend, that this one favor you should not refuse me, that I alone, and with the help of my men, may purge all evil from this hall. I have heard, too, that the monster's scorn of men is so great that he needs no weapon and fears none. Nor will I. My lord Hygelac might think less of me if I let my sword go where my feet were afraid to. If I hid behind some broad linden shield, my hands alone shall fight for me, struggle for life against this monster. Okay, so let's unpack a little bit about what we just read. So Beowulf introduces himself and he's like, yeah, you may have heard of me. He says that I rose from the darkness of war, dripping with my enemy's blood. So one, brag about himself. So he says that he rose from the darkness of war, meaning he won this whole war. Number 2, I drove 5 great giants into chains. So he took these giants as prisoners and he got rid of the entire race from Earth. So after he got rid of these giants, there are no more giants on the earth thanks to Beowulf. And then number 3, I swam in the blackness of night, hunting monsters out of the ocean and killing them one by one. So again, he's hunting monsters, killing all of the monsters. So these are 3 things that he brags about himself that he did. So he goes on and he's like, all right, I came all this way. I want you to promise me this one thing, that I alone and with my men can fight Grendel. So he does not want any help. He doesn't want them to help him fight Grendel because he wants all the glory. So if he beats this monster, he wants everybody to know that it was Beowulf and his men only who were able to fight and beat this monster. So then the next part we're going to talk about really quickly is right here. So he's saying, it's so great, or that the monster is so strong that he needs no weapons, neither will I. So he's saying, because this monster doesn't have any weapons, I'm not going to have any weapons either. So it's going to be a fair fight. And then he goes on to say that my lord Hygelac, so that's his king, might think less of me if I let my sword go where my feet were afraid to. So he's saying that if I used my sword instead of just fighting this monster, that my king would think less of me. So the 2 reasons that he's not going to use any weapons are because Grendel is not using any weapons and he's worried that his king is going to think less of him. All right, so we're almost done, just this last little part left to go. So Beowulf continues. He says, God must decide who will be given to death's cold grip. Grendel's plan, I think, will be what it's been before, to invade this hall and gorge his belly with our bodies. If he can. And I think if my time will have come, there will be nothing to mourn over, no corpse to prepare for its grave. Grendel will carry our bloody flesh to the moors, to crunch on our bones, and smear torn scraps of our skin on the walls of his den. No, I expect no Danes will fret about sewing our shrouds, if he wins. And if death does take me, send the hammered mail of my armor to Hygelac. Return the inheritance I had from Hrethel, and he from Wayland. Fate will unwind as it must. So Beowulf's basically saying that God will decide who's going to win, whether he's going to win or whether Grendel's going to win. He's going to leave it up to God. And he says, I think if he does kill me, nothing will be left of my body, so don't worry about that. You don't have to clean that up. So I think that pretty much answers most of the questions. Make sure that you did fill out that Microsoft form answering the questions as we were reading. Now that we've read both of these sections, you can go ahead and take the quiz that is on Blackboard for you, and that should be the majority of your online work for the week.